How you doing, brothers and sisters? I hope everyone's doing well. I am going to read one more time. I'm Michelle, um, from this book from a dear friend who gave this to me. And it's just really fascinating. It was written by Jim Stevens. He's a really wonderful person of integrity, internally spiritual person, uh, who lives his life doing what he can to make God's wishes come true. So he wrote this book, and it's called 101 Proofs for God, or another way to say it, 101 Proofs for the existence of God. 101. So I am going to be reading chapter number 70, proof number 70. It's called Healing. I read it once before, but there was some scientific language that I didn't understand, and so I'm going to read it again and try to do a better job of pronouncing some of this language. Okay? So, this chapter, yes, it's called Healing. So let's start. A couple weeks ago, I was working in the garage and I scraped my arm on the corner of a sheet of wood. As would be expected, I started to bleed because I had scraped off the surface layer of skin about 3/8 of an inch across. For the next couple of weeks, I have been watching my arm heal, which is one of the most amazing abilities inherent in all living organisms. Living beings can repair themselves from damage. Healing is such an amazing process, even more astounding when you research all the stages that your body goes through in that process. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of processes involved for a healing to take place. The ability to heal could not have developed in a Darwinian process that is slow and gradual. Half stopping the bleeding is not enough. Let me share just a summary of a few of those processes with you. But first, here is a quote that I found that shows scientists really can't explain the whole process very well at all. Despite the advances in understanding the science of wound healing, many more steps have yet to be discovered and elucidated. Many more steps. Here's one quote. Although seemingly basic in concept, advances in molecular science have allowed modern medicine to gain a true appreciation of the complex interplay between the cells involved in the phases of wound healing. Note that it is still too complicated for them to understand, for the scientists to understand. How can they believe it happened by chance? They just assume no God, and then they make up theories from there. To continue, scientists vary as to whether there are 3 or 4 phases to the healing process, but regardless of how many, they agree that there are distinct phases that do happen. Here's a quote. When your skin gets cut, your body springs into action to heal the wound. First, the body works to limit blood loss by reducing the amount of blood flowing to the wounded area. Proteins in blood, such as fibrin, work with the blood platelets already in place and plasma to form a protective covering called a scab. While your skin regenerates under this protective layer, the scab protects the wound from outside infection. Notice that your blood vessels leading to the wound constrict at first to limit the blood loss. Wounded cells release thromboxane A2 and prostaglandin 2 alpha, which cause the vessel constriction. Once blood loss stops, then the blood vessels expand to allow more white blood cells to accumulate and get rid of infection, bacteria, and debris. They do the opposite of what they did before. How is this possible? Platelets, triggered by enzymes leaked from the torn blood vessel, rush to the scene. These sticky blood cells clump to each other and then adhere to the sides of the torn blood vessel, making a plug. Clotting proteins in the blood join forces to form a fibrin net that holds the platelet plug in place over the tear. And in just a few seconds or minutes, depending on how bad the scrape is, bleeding stops. It just stops. Thanks to coagulation. The fibrin plug becomes a scab that will eventually fall off or be reabsorbed into the body once healing is complete. The scab makes a dry, temporary crust which protects the damaged area during healing. The blood contains lots of platelets for just this purpose to happen. Platelets only exist in animals. They are produced in a totally different location in your body from the skin, namely the bone marrow. A healthy adult produces about 1 trillion platelets a day, and they only circulate for about 8 to 9 days before being completely removed by the spleen and liver. Platelets are so tiny, they are only 1/5 the size of red blood cells. Note carefully this quote. Complicating any verbal description is the fact that at least 193 proteins and 301 interactions are involved in platelet dynamics. That is to say, or in other words, the making of platelets. If this process evolved in a slow and gradual way, the body would bleed to death and die before it could reproduce. Think of all the times you get injured and bleed during your lifetime. Of course, evolutionists would probably say that the healing ability was developed long before humans came along. But the problem for simpler organisms is even more complicated. They are much more likely to die from a simple wound than we are. The odds are less they could ever reproduce. The healing process is extremely complicated. Therefore, it could never evolve in one generation according to the theory of evolution. And what about platelets only existing in animals? They must have been created by God, or the first animals would have bled to death before they could evolve. The second phase of healing is inflammation. The blood vessels that previously constricted to stop blood loss now dilate to bring more blood to the area. The area swells up, and the extra blood brings the white blood cells, which engulf and kill bacteria, and remove debris. Fibroblast cells also gather at the site and start producing collagen, which gradually fills up the wound under the scab and creates new capillaries. Skin cells around the edges of the wound thicken up and gradually stretch under the scab into the center of the wound, meeting skin from the other side. This takes about 3 weeks. This tissue forms a scar, which gradually becomes stronger as more collagen is added, taking up to 3 years to complete the healing. Here is a description of the next phase called proliferation. Proliferation, which is growth of new tissue. In this phase, angiogenesis, called deposition, granulation. Okay, let's do this again. In this phase, angiogenesis, collagen deposition, granulation, tissue formation. I'm being bitten by mosquitoes here. Epithelialization and wound contraction occur. In angiogenesis, vascular endothelial cells form new blood vessels. In fibroplasia and granulation tissue formation, fibroblasts grow and form a new provisional extracellular matrix, or in other words, or abbreviation, ECM, by excreting collagen and fibronectin. Concurrently, re-epithelialization of the epidermis occurs, in which epithelial cells proliferate and crawl atop the wound bed, providing cover for the new tissue. That's a lot of different processes going on involving all kinds of different specialized cells and chemicals. Healing doesn't work if any of these processes are not functioning. So how could evolution, by slow and gradual changes, possibly create such an intricate system? We're not done yet. Wound contraction takes place next by cells called myofibroblasts, contracting like muscles and shrinking the wound. Then unneeded cells die off, somehow knowing they are not needed. The last phase is maturation and remodeling, where cells realign themselves like the original skin and unneeded cells die off. Increased collagen production and breakdown continue for 6 months to 1 year after injury. The initial type 3 collagen is replaced by type 1 collagen until a type 1 type 2 ratio of 4:1 is reached, which is equal to normal skin. Also, fibroblasts differentiate into myofibroblasts, causing tissue contraction during this phase of wound healing. How do the cells know what the original skin looked like and then be able to replace it? This information and description are extremely simplified. Read up on it a little more if you are interested. If not, take my word for it. Healing ability is no accident. So there must be God. Okay, Jim. Thank you so much for this. We appreciate it. Okay. Everyone take care, and I'll see you another time. Bye.